Mr. Rothbart's neighborhood. Davy Rothbart lives on Chicago's West Side, but our story with him today really begins before he knew any of his current neighbors. Back long ago, when he had one special neighbor.
When we were kids, my brother Mike wrote a letter to Mr. Rogers. My brother was 6, I was 3. On a recent show, a deaf woman had paid Mr. Rogers' neighborhood a visit, and my brother wanted to tell Mr. Rogers about our mom, because she's deaf too. A few weeks later, an envelope addressed to Mike appeared in our mailbox. It was a letter from Fred Rogers. My whole family was pretty excited. Mike wrote to Mr. Rogers again, and they began a little correspondence. The next summer, my family was headed to Massachusetts for a week's vacation, and Mr. Rogers invited all of us to chill with him for a day at his summer home on Nantucket Island. Here's what I remember. A long car trip, an afternoon's ride on a great big ferry boat, and then we were clattering down a gravel road and my mom said, "There's Mr. Rogers' house." We knocked on his door, and there he was. The way I remember it, Mr. Rogers had in his house the entire set from the neighborhood of Make-Believe. King Friday was there, Lady Elaine, X the Owl, Daniel Striped Tiger. We played way past dinner time and into the night. I can't say I'm a grown-up now, but I have grown up. And there's some things about that visit with Mr. Rogers that just don't quite make sense to me now. I mean, why would a guy, even Mr. Rogers, interrupt his vacation to hang out with a couple of kids? Were we the only kids he'd ever invited to visit him, or was this a standard practice? And what was up with the whole neighborhood of make-believe at his house? Could that really be true? I wanted to see Mr. Rogers again and ask him some of these questions. So the day before my 26th birthday, This American Life producer Alex Bloomberg and I flew to Pittsburgh, Mr. Rogers' hometown, for another visit. We got picked up at the airport by his PR director, a guy named David Newell. You might know him as Mr. McFeely, the mailman on the show. One speedy delivery later, we're in the same room with Mr. Rogers.
Hi, Mr. Rogers.
Davy.
Hi.
Welcome.
Good to see you.
Oh, I'm glad to see you after all these years.
It's been a while.
I should say you were about this big.
Well, the last time I saw you, you were holding. You could lift me up in your arms.
Yeah.
I don't know if that'd be possible now.
Well, I could try. How's your mom?
She's doing real well.
Oh, good.
It's taken 6 months to arrange this meeting. Mr. Rogers is an incredibly busy man, and his staff, though they're kind and well-meaning, is protective of his time.
You can walk down the
There'd been some debate about where we'd meet with Fred. We finally settled on the WQED studios, where Mr. Rogers has filmed his show for the last 30 years, because, as his chief assistant told me, Fred feels most comfortable around a piano.
Welcome to this neighborhood.
Reunion?
Oh, is this it?
This is me visiting you on Nantucket.
I show Fred the pictures of my family visiting him when I was 4. In one of them, he's in beach clothes, holding me in his arms, my parents on either side. I ask him what he remembers about our visit, but it was a long time ago. He's met thousands of kids since then, and though he's too polite to say it, I don't think he remembers me specifically, or what we did that day.
But ordinarily I would play and ask the children to sing "It's a Beautiful Day in the State," you know, and and sometimes I would ask children, I don't know whether I ask you, but I would ask them if they could recognize different characters from the neighborhood of Make-Believe.
That's what I remember.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember us. I remember, I thought, well, this can't be right. I remember there being the entire set of the Land of Make-Believe at your in here in this building in this picture, but you didn't have all the set and the castle and everything, but just the fact that the puppets were probably there.
They may not have even been there. No, the sound of them could have been there.
Meow, meow, beautiful meow. Meow, meow, Henrietta, meow, meow, cat.
Now that's Henrietta Pussycat. And I'm X the Owl. I was just flying around looking for all of you. Hey, welcome to this neighborhood.
Up till now, I've never interviewed a dude who punctuates his points by pulling puppets out of a little gym bag and talking in the voice of an owl. But with Mr. Rogers, it doesn't seem weird. It's hard to describe his presence exactly, the strength of it. When you talk with him, he's utterly engaged. He asks a lot of questions, and he seems to actually care about what you say. He lets his feelings come right to the surface. I've never been around someone who's both so vulnerable and so fearless about showing you who he is. Still, playing pretend with him, sometimes you just don't know what to say. It was Daniel Striped Tiger that finally tripped me up. Listen for when I lose it.
I'm still pretty shy.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi, how are you, Davy?
Good to meet you.
Thanks. And this one stripe of mine is awfully itchy. I wonder if you could scratch it.
Oh, I'd be happy
That's
to.
it. Oh, boy, that feels so good. I was a factory reject.
What do you mean by that, Dan?
Yeah.
You look all right to me.
The thing is, I never looked like a fierce tiger, and hardly any tiger lives in a clock. But that's who I am, and after a while, if you get to know me, you probably accept me exactly as I am. The way I accept you.
I think that's wonderful.
When I told people in my neighborhood I was going out to visit Mr. Rogers, they kept wondering the same thing. What would Mr. Rogers do if he had to deal with the problems in our neighborhood? Fred agreed to talk to me about what goes on there and share his thoughts. So come with me, won't you, to my neighborhood, a very special place I call the 1800 block of West Augusta. Our first stop, Julie, who doesn't like the loud music from the apartment below.
I get the broom, the weapon of choice, and I come out and I pound it on the floor.
Give me show me how that sounds. Okay, the truth is, her loud downstairs neighbor, it's me. Just a few little
Well,
taps.
Davy, you know it wasn't just a few. That's a leading question. You're leading the witness. It can be more if the music doesn't get turned down immediately. I've only done this like twice. I've only done it twice. Haven't I? Haven't I?
Actually, the way I remember it, they were banging on the floor a couple nights a week for a month. Finally one night I went upstairs, acting all innocent. Look, what's going on up here? We're trying to get some rest downstairs, but there's this constant hammering sound. Is everything alright? I think I had Julie's husband Greg kind of discombobulated. He was like, I think that's my wife. The music? The turf war actually began the first day my roommate and I moved in. We'd play music, Julie would send Greg to knock on our door, or sometimes just bang that broom on the floor. We eventually worked out that quiet hours would start after 10 p.m., but still, sometimes we'd have friends over and yeah, we'd play our music anyways. Me and my roommate, we both figured Julie was crazy, and actually we kind of felt sorry for Greg, but I guess our music was pretty rough on her.
It's like if you're being tortured in a prison camp, you know, they do something to you enough, after a while you're like, oh, stop the madness. And it's just the bass sound, you know, it's just kind of a thumping sound. And I don't know why, it just drove me insane. And so even when it was a little bit, Greg wouldn't even be able to hear it. And I'd be like, oh my God, do you hear that?
Let's check back in with Mr. Rogers for a quick second. Here's his take on things.
Good for you, Julie. I hate loud music.
Hey,
Good for you,
you're taking
Julie.
you're taking her side. You haven't even heard the whole story.
Oh, okay.
Well,
finish.
no, that is the whole story. Okay, you're on her side. Well, but Fred, it's my space. Can't I listen to loud music in my space? I mean, what's wrong with that?
You can, but you can put earphone or headphones on. No silence. We started with silence, and I will always uphold a person's right to silence. But I'm super sensitive about this stuff. I am so sensitive that sometimes I was in Florida not too long ago, and the traffic was so loud that I slept in the closet. I took the cushions from the couch and made a bed in the closet.
And that's what I should suggest to Julie.
Go into the closet.
Exactly.
I guess I have a feeling you're getting to know Julie though, and once you do know her, then either your music isn't going to bother her so much, or you're going to care so much about her that you'll probably turn it down a couple notches anyway.
How'd you know that?
Mr. Rogers had broke it down perfect. That's exactly what's happened between me and Julie. We're not fighting over music anymore. I think for a lot of people, the only way they come in contact with their neighbors is through conflict. I might not have even gotten to know Greg and Julie if she wasn't always banging on the floor. But while the three of us were hanging out that night in their apartment, they told me a story that at the time I didn't pay any attention to, but later made me see something. There's an invisible architecture that links together the folks who share a neighborhood. Greg and Julie were talking about our landlady's dog. Not the one she has now, but her old dog, the one that disappeared, mysteriously. Greg had the inside scoop from the landlady.
I had asked her what had happened to the dog, and she said she let it out and somebody stole it.
So we were kind of like, you know what? Nobody would have stolen that dog. Nobody would have stolen that dog. That dog was so old. It was what is that word when you can't? Incontinent?
A few days later, I ran into my neighbor from across the street, Mike, a guy who makes his living fixing cars. Not in a shop, he just lines them up by the curb in front of his apartment. And my landlady's dog came up again, out of nowhere. We were just BSing about something totally different, the meaning of the word neighbor.
To me, a neighbor is a friend, like family. But there's some people that no matter how much you try to be nice, they're unappreciative. Like the landlady from here. She accused me one day of stealing her dog. It sounds a little funny, but it's true. And the dog was just about as old as she is. What would I want with a dog that when he was so old he couldn't even hardly walk or see?
Mike's a good guy. He's like the unofficial mayor of my neighborhood. He knows everybody. He's always waving. His daughter asked him once if his arm gets tired by the end of the day. Now and then I see Mike going up and down the street with a big broom, a one-man volunteer cleaning brigade. He's not the kind of guy who steals dogs from old ladies.
But she's 80-something years old, so I understand. She's a little senile, So my sister had a beautiful dog. She had the shots for it, paid for the shots. She had the license, everything. I went out of my way. I gave it to my neighbor, Jeannie, and told her to give it to her, the landlady here. And I gave it to Jeannie to give to her, because if I would have gave it to her, she probably wouldn't have taken it. And to this day, she does not know that I gave her that dog.
I don't need to tell you. This is the kind of story Mr. Rogers likes to hear.
My, what a tender heart. Wouldn't that be somebody that you'd like to know? Is this somebody that you know?
Oh, I know him well. Yeah, he lives across the street from me.
Oh, what a fine young man.
Across the street from my apartment, there's a boarded-up building that everyone says used to be a brothel. The next building over belongs to a kid named Hoppy and his blind grandfather Pete. About 15 or 20 folks stay at their place. More than once I've seen the cops go in there and bring someone out in handcuffs. Hoppy and Pete keep a kind of used car lot going on the street in front of their building. Cars that Mike fixes up. In fact, I bought my car from them, a 73 Ford LTD. Every time I pull up, Mike whistles and shakes his head and says, "It's a cruiser, man, it's a cruiser." These days, there's not as many old Cadillacs and Lincolns parked on the block at night. More Saturns and Explorers and shiny VW Jettas. Old buildings are being demolished. In their place, 3-story condominiums sprout right up.
The condos are taking over all our neighborhood. Our neighborhood ain't even here no more. It's gone.
On the corner of Honore and Iowa, just after dark, 3 teenagers were hanging out, sipping deuces, 22-ounce bottles of beer. Gustavo, Isaac, and Hernando, whose nickname is the Mouth, and who's probably lived at 10 different apartments in a 4-block radius.
Everywhere in this whole neighborhood, Marshfield and Cortez, Paulina and Cortez, Hermitage and Cortez, Erie and Walcott, Chicago and Wood, everywhere you name, I lived all around here, and I know more. I can't afford the rent. Papa's gotta move out. But I still come back. I'll always be here. Regardless who moves in, I'll always be here. You can take the gangbanger away from the hood, but you can't take the hood away from a gangbanger, you know what I'm saying?
As gang members go, these guys are pretty low-key. They sell weed, hang out drinking.
You know, torturing their
I had
kids.
decided to talk to them because when I was roaming my neighborhood, talking to my neighbors, the same thing kept coming up. A lot of people were afraid of their neighbors. Who exactly are you afraid of, I'd ask. They all answered the same way. The gangbangers. The kids in baggy jeans and basketball jerseys who cruised the neighborhood with their stereos bumping. The gangbangers, they said, those are the bad neighbors.
Years and maybe even 10.
I guess it's no surprise the mouth had his own idea about who the bad neighbors are. The ones who fear and distrust him.
There was a neighbor in the neighborhood that he didn't agree with what we did so much, so he'd stand in his house with a video camera and record what we were doing, try to bring it to the beat meetings, you know. He used to follow us around with cameras, literally follow us around the neighborhood with cameras, you know, and say, I'm gonna call the cops on you, and, you know, well, for what? We ain't bothering you, you know. That's what I think the worst neighbor is, you know.
Yeah. They come in here fearing us, saying that, you know, maybe thinking that we're gonna do this and do that, but we'll talk to you, you know what I'm saying, bro? We ain't animals, bro. We're normal people like you.
Someone like me and him who don't have everything we
We're
want.
drinking a Heineken, you know.
They're in their house, what do? They drink maybe some wine or something, you know. And to us, this where we're standing on a pavement, this is our house, you know. I've been here longer than them. I'm older. I got an older relationship with this neighborhood than their building they live in.
You are the only one like you, my friend. I like you. Here's the bridge in the daytime.
Back in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, we talk things over.
Anytime that
Whether it's music, or a dog that's vanished, or neighbors who fear each other, it becomes clear that what he'd do in any of these situations is pretty much the same.
I can tell you what I would hope that I would do. I would hope that I would be brave enough to visit. It's so easy to condemn when we don't know. And if I would visit you and find out that you are a reasonable person, I could tell you about my sensitivities and see if it would make any difference to you.
It's funny, a lot of the things, like
Producer
in your
Alex
interviews,
Bloomberg
what
comes
you-
in with a
what
question.
You said if you were in Davy's neighbor's situation, you said that you hoped you would have enough courage to go down and visit. And a lot of what you were finding when you were talking to people had to do with that same sort of notion. And I'm wondering, like, what is it that we're afraid of, do you think?
Perhaps we think that we won't find another human being inside that person. Perhaps we think that, oh, there maybe are people in this world who I can't ever communicate with. And so I'll just give up before I try. And how sad it is to think that we would give up on any other creature who's just like us.
Half the people around here wouldn't even, if they would listen to this tape, they wouldn't put the three faces that are behind the talking, they wouldn't put it together because they wouldn't sit there and think that we're intelligent enough to sit there and think about, you know, stuff like that happens in everyday life, you know. They look at us as, you know, kids that are just probably doing bad, you know. They don't need to do that because, you know, we don't look at them and say, oh, they're rich snobs, you know. We say, you know, this person carrying their life, doing what they're doing, minding their business, you know. Just because I carry my life in a different way, you don't have to fear me, you know.
We'll talk to you. Have a good time. Maybe we got stuff in common, you know?
A few weeks ago, in the middle of the night, there was a huge fire in the building next door to Hoppy and Pete's. Nobody seemed to be hurt. Everyone on the block came out of their buildings and stood on the sidewalks, watching the blaze and looking around at each other. Everyone in t-shirts and bathrobes and nightgowns, blinking their eyes, the light from the fire on their faces. In a moment like that, it doesn't seem like it would be that hard for everyone to just see each other as people, the way Mr. Rogers and the Mouth both talk about. But you know how it goes. After an hour, the firemen rolled up their hoses, the trucks drifted away, and everyone disappeared back into their own apartments.
Davy Rothbart, he's the creator of Found Magazine. His new book, Found 2, comes out this month as he heads out on a 36-city tour. Details at www.foundmagazine.com.